Morning, morning all, morning, morning. Morning, Anna. Point Commander Sharon, morning to you. Happy Easter to all. Carol Myers, morning, Carol. Christopher Surratt, morning to you, sir. Tuning in from Florida. Yes, one of my favorite places, my vacation place, sir. Ruth Fronton, morning to you. Florida as well, yeah. A visit is long overdue, but these ticket prices ridiculous these days, boy. Anyway, it has to happen. Alison Rogers Joseph, morning to you. Zion Genesis, morning. Simdom 17, morning to you. Hugh Bridgman, morning, morning all. Annette Baird, morning. Jennifer Joseph. Janice Hamlet, morning. Gail Ochoa, morning to you. Michelle Superwoman, morning. To all of the folks on YouTube, morning. All of the folks on Facebook. Facebook people, you could just let me confirm for me that you're all hearing well. I know we usually have some issues with respect to Facebook in terms of the audio. Just get this here. See who else we have there. Felix Hospitales. Good morning to you, sir. And Marie Reed. Morning. Morning, Alison. Morning, Angie. I haven't seen Angie name pop up yet, but I'm assuming that Angie is there. Right. So our numbers are looking good. It is now 11:04. All right. Give them a minute again and then see. My point commander Sharon is telling me no video. You're not getting video on Facebook. Facebook or the YouTube? Oh, YouTube. All right. Thanks for letting me know, guys. I think we should be good now. Okay, great. So yes, me now on YouTube. All right. Good. Okay, right. So again, good morning to all. I guess we could get into it. You know, every time I start these lives, I say they're not going to be too long, and as soon as you start getting into it, right. And Marie Batiste, good morning. Marilyn McKenzie, morning. Marilyn. Sonia Villarreal, morning to you. Miss Marilyn Gordon, good morning. Good morning to you. Right. So the last live that I did on Friday was it. So I would have touched a bit on the issue of NIS, and there were a couple of persons who would have contacted me and asked me if I could delve a little more in that. So I would want to treat with that as an exclusive live. So I'm just doing a little more research to get a little more information. And once I do that, I would be able to provide that information. So we just do a whole live on NIS and the issue of pension reform to clear up any misconceptions with respect to that. Happen here. So it's important to get the information out. So I did indicate last Friday that I wanted to interrogate a little more what the UNC proposed in 2020 and what they are proposing in 2025. What you could expect in terms of governance from a UNC government. And every time they have a meeting, you know, Mrs. Pasabi says, I keep saying, when we take government in 2025, when we take government, so they have an expectation that they are going to take government in 2025. But it's important for the people to know what to expect. Not cat and bag, as they would have sold you in 2010. And a lot of people bought that bag and opened it. And when they opened it, only to realize all wasn't as it seemed. And it didn't take long for them to fall out of favor with the population, so much so that in 2013, just 3 years after they came into office, actually less than 3 years, we saw the House of Cards, the PP House of Cards, started to collapse. First, of course, with the Tobago ETHA elections in 2013, was it? Where they lost 12-0, despite the fact that millions of dollars was pumped in Tobago to support Ashwood Jack, the pumpkin and Bodie man who built a house from pumpkin Bodie, a mansion. Yes, they would have lost that, and then we had the Shogunas West by-election, which they lost to Mr. Jack Warner. Following that, later on, they would have had the St. Joseph by-election, which they lost to the PNM, and then the local government election, where they went from 11 seats or 11 corporations to 5. And Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar said, "We win, the green man gone. Only under Kamlamatics could you go from 11 to 5 and you declare victory." And the supporters clap for that. Yeah. But before I get into that, there are 2 other issues that I wanted to touch on. First of all, I wanted to revisit the issue of this fire that took place last week that resulted in the loss of life of a mother and daughter, a most unfortunate situation. And this would have happened in the constituency of Siparia, the constituency of the misleader of the opposition, Kamla Prasad-Bissessar. Good morning to His Excellency Nigel O'Connor, President of Pleasantville. Morning to you, sir, and to Marissa. Morning. Morning, Claudette, Jeffrey. Right. And Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar would have spoken to the issue, or rather several of them would have spoken to the issue at the last Monday night forum, last week, Monday. But they didn't, the angle that they took basically was to prostitute, unfortunately, this whole situation, to try and make the government look bad, to say that the Minister of National Security is once again incompetent because he has responsibility for the fire services following under him. And we have so many fire stations that are without fire tenders, without the necessary equipment to do the job that they need to do. And this is an indictment on the government of Trinidad and Tobago, right? But again, I always say we don't have journalists, we have bacchanalists posing as journalists. Because the chief fire officer would have done an interview, I think it was on I-95, a few days ago, in which he made some statements to me which would have warranted, and it was carried in several newspapers, not only those affiliated with I-95 and OCM. But his comments have reached far and wide, because in those comments, he's now taking some licks. He's now taking some licks from some of his officers, because he made the statement that some of these officers are to blame for the state of the vehicles, the way that they drive the vehicles and so on, incurring damage to the vehicles, resulting in them having to be packed up. And because the country is still reeling from supply side issues with respect to COVID, it's difficult to get the parts and so on coming into Trinidad to be able to treat with fixing some of these vehicles. But he's not inclined to take up, for instance, the suggestion of one Inshan Ishmael. We're all familiar with that name. That controversial figure who is saying, well, a fire truck is basically a flatbed, is a chassis with a water tank on it, a pump, and a hose. And so that's all we need. But we wouldn't look at it from that perspective, because that if we go down that road, then we would not, from that perspective, because that if we go down that road, then we would not be able to make massive profits. So, let me get him properly. Let me quote him well. Don't like to misquote, you see? This is the depth of stupidity that resides or comes out of the mouths of people who figure they know all about how to run a country. Let me get this to you here. He's also defending Marshall Walker with respect, but anyway, that is UNC business. Let me get this here, right? Yeah. I also see that he wants to force Krokro. He's attempting to force Krokro to put out a statement to tell people do not share videos of the song. I want to remind Mr. Ishmael, your injunction is against Kru, not against the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And the same people who are always accusing Dr. Rowley and this government of being dictators, you now want to come to go to the court, to have the court tell Kru, to tell his supporters and anybody who comes across the song, to injunct them from posting the song or commenting on it. Yeah, madman? Yeah, but all of us want to freedom of speech and freedom of speech, but you want to tell the citizens of this country what we can and cannot share on social media. You paying our bills, sir? You're fast and out of place. But anyway, I expect no better from these people. Let me see here. Let me see if I get this here. Where is it? Yeah, and then they want to call, he says, BNM people stupid because of that. Typical. So we know who you supported. So I ain't gonna call no name, but if it fall in your garden, you know what to do. Hear what he says, huh? Before I just deviating a little bit. He says, when you are so illiterate that you don't understand that you can play anything you want in your private capacity, but when an injunction is in effect, you cannot publicly disseminate. Most PNM supporters again carry on. Right. Anyway. And that's international for you. Where is this post that he put up? Right? His suggestion. Let me see if I get it here. So I don't know if it is that he removed it, but his suggestion to WASA, well, not WASA, sorry, the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, is here, well, just get a flatbed with a chassis, drop a water tank on it, hitch up a pump, and you're good to go. So next time there's a fire in your home or a fire in your neighborhood, don't call the TTFS, don't call the fire services, call WASA. Yeah, call WASA and tell them, yeah, we have a fire here. And since according to Injan Ishmael, all you need for a fire truck is a flatbed, just a chassis, a water tank, and a pump, right? Forget the fire services, call WASA henceforth. Really. But you want to call PNM people British. So this fire took place in the constituency of the Miss Leader of the Opposition, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, right? And she spoke about it at the Monday Night Forum. But again, as I said, the angle taken by her, Rural Munilal, and others, because they're talking about, oh, this government, they spent $60 million to run down, to chase down Anil and Munilal, but they can't find money to pay to buy fire tenders, and that 60 million could have buy 20 fire tenders and so on. And as I told you all on Friday, all of a sudden, the cost of a fire truck. Well, apparently, they knew, as I will read for you shortly, they knew the cost of a fire truck in 2013 as well. But that didn't matter. You see? As Kamla Persad-Bissessar, as the Member of Parliament for Siparia, visited the family of the deceased. I don't want to make it politics. But you see, had it been Dr. Rowley, they would have been on his case. Had she visited family, other than the sentiments that she expressed on the Monday Night Forum, has she conveyed any sort of condolence directly to the family of these two unfortunate souls? As a Member of Parliament for Siparia, the constituency in which this incident took place? Not that I'm aware of, because we know had she done so, she would have had to be accompanied by an entire entourage of UNC supporters and a camera crew, because this is something for which you could get political mileage off of, or so they think. And we would have seen it posted all over her Facebook page, and she would have invited the media to come along so that they could carry a story, right? Because the media picked up the comments that they made at the Monday Night Forum talking about 60, in fact, that was the headline, 60 million spent to investigate Munilal and Anil Roberts, but the government can't find money to buy fire tenders. Let's address that. I'm reading here for you an article dated the 5th of June, 2013, entitled, Top Fire Officer Advised Write-Off. And this is in respect to the fire tender that went over the cliff, went over the precipice in Blanchy Shares, the infamous fire tender for which they spent over $6 million to retrieve. All right? That was one of the many, many issues that resulted in them losing the general election of 2015, despite the fact that they will tell you the reason why they lost the general election of 2015 is because PNM supporters like to vote race. And it was because of not section 34, it was because of the email gate affair, and it was because of not section 34, it was because of the email gate affair that the majority of the electorate believed that the emails were fake. And that is why they lost the election. They lost the election because of the 1 hour extension by the EBC, not because of issues like this. That's what they would tell you, right? And this is a story by Anika Gums Sandiford. The water tender involved in an accident last November was so badly damaged that it should have been disposed of. Acting Deputy Chief Fire Officer Dana Roach made the recommendation in a November 29th letter, which also recommended that a replacement should be acquired for approximately $2.7 million. The letter was written before Cabinet agreed to the reduced price of $6.8 million for retrieving the fire truck after it ran over a cliff in Blanchisseuse. Cabinet twice refused to agree to the original quotation of $10 million. The letter obtained by the TNT Guardian said 9 days after the accident on November 17th, the truck was inspected by a team comprising Acting Brigades Engineer Earl Brown, Acting Divisional Fire Officer Arnold Bristow, and the Service Manager of Indocom Limited, the local agent for Rosenbauer International, the company that supplied the water tender. The inspection was to evaluate its serviceability. The team found damage to the entire rear of the appliance, damage to the water tank, severe damage to the crew, cab, and drivetrain. On this basis, Roach wrote, in this regard, the general consensus was that it was too costly to refurbish the vehicle as opposed to purchasing a new appliance of approximately $2.7 million. This is a letter that was penned following an investigation by the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, by inspection of the fire tender, and recommendations were made to the Cabinet. It is therefore recommended that the appliance be placed on a board of survey listing to be disposed of, with a further recommendations were made to the Cabinet. It is therefore recommended that the appliance be placed on a board of survey listing to be disposed of, with a further recommendation that the appliance be retained and those serviceable parts be utilized for the maintenance of existing and similar appliances in the fleet. Contacted yesterday, Roach said, well, first of all, I have no comment to make. As far as I'm concerned, that is an internal matter. A decision was made to retrieve the vehicle, and that is it. Yeah. So clearly, right, I make a recommendation. I tell them that vehicle is not salvageable. Don't spend that money to retrieve it, because apparently the arrangements were made for the invoice for the $10 million to be sent to the fire service. Now, the fire services, under the law, any invoice over $1 million has to go through the permanent secretary, through the minister, and has to be forwarded to Cabinet for approval. So the fire service could not have approved that $10 million bill, right? But it was sent to the fire service as the client. The water tender from the Arima fire station was responding to a call from Blanchisseuse when it ran off the road, plunging over a 300-foot cliff. 6 firefighters were aboard but escaped serious injury. Cabinet twice refused to sign off on the $10,189,115 quotation submitted, but eventually agreed to a revised price of $6.8 million. The note was taken to Cabinet by the National Security Minister at the time, Jack Warner. The tender was retrieved by Sammy's Multi-Lift Services, a subsidiary of Junior Sammy Contractors. In an interview with the TNT Guardian last week, Ramdat Ramsubir of Sammy's Multi-Lift insisted the cost was justified when told that concerns had been raised about the hefty sum paid for the job. Ramsubir said, it required a lot of equipment and manpower. It took us 4 days. We used modular trailers, and we had other mobile equipment that was used to minimize traffic. We had about 25 people on site who literally camped out there. However, in a report dated November 22nd and sent to the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of National Security, Jennifer Boko Blake, former Chief Fire Officer Carl Williams said the job was completed in 2 days after the accident. Ramsubir could not be contacted yesterday, so he said it take 4 days. Chief Fire Officer said it take 2 days. I don't know. Somebody lying. In a cover letter attached to the report sent to the Permanent Secretary, former Chief Fire Officer Carl Williams wrote, Mr. Junior Sammy of Jusamco Limited was contacted, and a crew from that company was sent to retrieve the water tanker from the precipice. This Herculean task was achieved at around 9 p.m. on November 19th, right? And we see here that the accident took place on November 17th, so we know clearly who was telling the truth with respect to the number of days it took to retrieve the fire truck. The appliance vehicle was sent to Arima Fire Station to maintain our emergency response in that area. Williams also mentioned the outstanding payment to SAMI Multi-Lift Services Limited. Referring Buko Blake to the invoice submitted, Williams said, I have perused the attached document and found the contents to be genuine. In this regard, payment to SAMI's Multi-Lift Services Limited in the sum of $10,189,150 remains outstanding. This payment is to be made for retrieval of number 504 water tank, registration TBY 9251, which fell down a precipice in Blanchy Shares in the vicinity of the Acerite Nature Center on November 17, 2012. Williams reported that the fire service land search and rescue teams from the Santa Cruz and Chaguanas fire stations had gone to the scene but were unable to retrieve the water tender. Breakdown of the bill. Here it is. While Ramsey refused to give a breakdown of the bill, the TNT Guardian obtained a copy of the pricing for the job. So Mr. Ramsey is the manager for SAMI Multi-Lift. Now, if everything is above board, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to provide the breakdown for the bill. But here's what it is. The 10 million bill, VAT inclusive, listed. Supply of equipment, 7,539,000. Supply of manpower, 303,600. Supply of supervisors for 4 days, $522,500. Transportation of workers, $100,000. Miscellaneous tools, compressor, power tools, $150,000. Consumables, $115,000. Hygienic facilities, $65,000, and meals, $65,000 for 2 days. $65,000 in meals for 2 days. Okay, what am I eating? Now, what I find interesting here, it says miscellaneous tools, compressor, power tools, $150,000, but then you have supply of equipment for $7,539,000. Really? Supply of manpower, $303,600. $100,000 to transport workers for 2 days? Really? To transport workers from Clacton Bay, assuming, to Blanchy Shares for 2 days. $100,000. Assuming, to Blanchy Shares for 2 days. $100,000. $100,000, right? For 2 days. Wow. But in spite of the fact that the experts at the fire services would have generated a report prior to cabinet taking a decision, right? Telling them, there's no need to try and salvage. It's unsalvageable, right? So the $10 million, forget that. What we tell them earlier, forget that truck. We chop it up right where it is, bring the pieces, and you actually had other persons, other individuals, private contractors who indicated they could have done the job for $25,000. 50,000, yeah. But here it is, without this set of technical equipment and all that kind of because it's not like they lifted the truck out of the precipice and bring it back on the road. Because from the video footage that we would have seen, it looked like they just were able to get some wreck or something to go down, and they saw them pulling the truck through the trail, as the case may be. 10 million. So we see in this report that was sent to the cabinet, right? The fire services indicated to them that, here's what it said, I want to repeat it. In this regard, the general consensus, this is the heads of the fire service, general consensus was that it was too costly to refurbish the vehicle as opposed to purchasing a new appliance for approximately 2.2. So the cabinet was told what the cost of the new fire truck would be, 2.7 million. So it's not to say they didn't know. But you may recall that one of the points that was made by then Minister of Housing, Rudolph Munilal, was that the cabinet was informed that a brand new fire truck would have cost between $10 to $12 million, and therefore it made sense to pay $10 million to retrieve this one. But you have a letter before you from the fire services telling you a brand new truck would cost $2.7 million. The media didn't pick up on that. They didn't see the need to interrogate that, to ask Munilal. But here it is that we have evidence of a letter sent to you all from the fire services telling you that a new truck would cost $2.7 million, and you are telling us that based on the note that came to cabinet, you were informed that a new truck would cost 10 to 12 million. No, but you approved 6.8 million. That's a big cut, from 10.1 million to 6.8 million. And you know, it's amazing that when you look, this is just one example of several instances where contractors under that last administration would have sent bills to the government for hundreds of millions of dollars. And then in the end run, they settle for next to nothing. Namalco. I remember they sued the government for over $1 billion and settled for, I think, 400 and something million. Calco, that was suing the government for 80 something million and settled for 11. Remember that? Why? If you did your work and all of your work is above board and you could justify your invoice, justify the amount that you are charging, how is it that you're so willing to settle for significantly less? We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars less. From 89 million to 11. From 1.2 or 1.3 billion, is settled for 400 and something million. Now, if you have a good case, you could just hire the best of lawyers and let them come and fight that case for you and you could win. Once it is that you could justify, the court can't say, well, now that money is too much. If you could justify that this is what it costs, the court has no choice but to award you the money you're asking for. Anyway, but this is the government, the party that is telling you we are the government in waiting, right? And put us back in power so that you could get more of this. And as I said, we have journalists in this country, we have our analysts posing as journalists. Case in point. So with respect to the interview that was done by the current chief fire officer, you get it. He said many things. Said he's taking some licks from his officers because he made the claim that part of the reason why the vehicles are in the condition that they are in now is because some of these officers with their reckless driving and so on, and they're not taking proper care of the vehicles, resulting in the situation with which they are now faced. So yes, they have a number of vehicles that require servicing, but again, because of supply chain issues, still prolonged from the whole COVID situation, it is difficult now for them to get parts in a timely fashion to fix some of these vehicles. But there was one thing that the chief fire officer said that struck me, that I think that the media should have interrogated further and should have posed questions to the United National Congress, because notwithstanding the fact that the chief fire officer has made these statements, and they have been in the public domain for the past couple of days, nobody from the UNC has denied what he said. Let me read for you exactly what I'm referencing. Let me get it here, right? Just now. Bristow said, and this is the chief fire officer, in 2014, and he's saying here that a lot of the issues now plaguing the fire services with respect to equipment, with respect to fire tenders and the shortage thereof, started in 2014 under the People's Partnership Government. How? Let me explain. Bristow said that in 2014, the government of the day set out to construct fire stations in Mayaro, Avenue, and Ruka. But in 2017, when it was time to procure fire tenders for those locations, something happened which created a domino effect. So when the tendering process was executed, it wasn't done in a normal conventional manner in which fire service and government would have acquired the vehicles, and that process showed flaws. The evaluation committee, when they met, would have recommended a different course of action because the fire service, which is supposed to be the experts, weren't allowed to consider the technical components of the equipment that was being purchased, and that would have caused the whole process to be scrapped. 2014, right? Just a few months before the general election of 2015, they set about to build a whole set of fire stations. You all remember what Basil Pandey was? I can't remember if he was prime minister or he had already demitted office. He made the statement. He said, when you leave office, when government leaves office, oftentimes people say, where the money gone? Or where the money went? What they spend the money on? And so Pandey said, for that reason, when you're in government, you have to build things. So that when you leave government, when you leave office and people say, where the money went? What they spend the money on? You could tell them, go here, go there. You could point to this, point to that and say, look, we build this and we build that. And as I always quote my partner, Dane Francois, if you want a thief, build. Once you're in government, you want a thief, build stuff. You know why? Because then you could have cost overruns and so on. And yeah, mobilization fee and 20% of the cost of the contract, all kind of madness. But that's what Pandey said, build stuff, not just for the general use of the public here and the benefits of the population. You're building things so that when you leave up and people question what you did with the money, and if they accuse you of thieving, you could point and say, look, we build this, we build that. And it seems that the UNC under Kamala Prasad predecessor did the same thing. So they built fire station all over the place, but did not order any equipment to service these fire stations. They didn't order any equipment to operationalize these fire stations, right? Now, if they had ordered fire tenders, notwithstanding the fact that they lost the election, the fact of the matter is that because the fire tenders would have been ordered and paid for, when this administration came in 2015, 2016, or whenever, the fire tenders and other equipment would have already been ordered and paid for, so it would have come. Nothing came because there was nothing ordered. So you build fire station in Penal, you build fire station in Mayaro, you build fire station in Woodbrook, you build fire station in Lady Hales Avenue. All of these different places you build fire station. But they order one to fire tender, not one to service any of these fire stations. No equipment, right? So you just build to say, hey, look, we build a fire station. Well, what we call in the lead up to the 2015 general election, where photos started to surface on social media. Say, hey, look, we built a fire station. Well, what we call in the lead up to the 2015 general election, where photos started to surface on social media. For example, the Mayaro fire station, they rushed to open it, right? It was in no way ready to be operationalized, but they rushed to open it. Why? Because they suspected that, in the event that we lose this election, Oli will come as Prime Minister, and he will commission the fire station. He will open it, and plaque that they always put up, because every time they open one of these entities, they have a plaque, unveiling ceremony. So they have a plaque on the wall stating that this building was commissioned by whoever the Prime Minister was. And I guess Mrs. Prasad Bissessa didn't want that they build the fire stations and you have plaques on all of these fire stations bearing the name Keith Christopher Rowley, right? For perpetuity. So no matter how many years later, so long as these buildings stand, there will always be a plaque that says this building was commissioned by Keith Christopher Rowley and not Kamala Prasad Bissessa. And she wanted to ensure that her name was engraved on all of these plaques because it's her government built it, right? Her government built it. We're being care that they don't have any equipment. They will just run and open it, right? So that my name could be on the plaque and we lost the election and I then problem to deal with afterwards. Let them go and find money to buy fire tender. Let them find money to buy equipment, right? Let them find the money to hire fire officers to man these fire stations. So no consideration given to that. We building thing. But in terms of manpower, we there. That not be problem. Let the fire service deal with that. Fire tenders, forget that. They go deal with that after. But what about equipment for the fire officers and so on, right? Because all of the fire stations that we have now have staff. So you need to hire new fire. You have to get helmets for them. You have to get the raincoats. You have to get the boots. All of these different things. Breathing apparatus and all that. Forget that. We just running an open fire station, man. And we'll get a few officers from here, there, and everywhere to come and stand up and stand at attention. And Kamala will read a speech, and we will clap and take pictures and say, yes, the People's Partnership, look, they're working. Look how much fire station they built. That making sense. And after all of the pomp and ceremony done, the fire station just there collecting dust, right? Because they have nothing in place to operationalize. So what the chief fire officer is saying, as a result of them having done that, they now had, whereas you would have had several fire stations that had reserved tenders, a backup tender. So if one of the tenders was down for whatever reason, maintenance, again, an accident, bong something, or as the case maybe need a part, we have a spare fire tender that we could use in the interim while the other one is being serviced. But that, the People's Partnerships spoke in the wheel of that whole arrangement, because when they built all of these fire stations, didn't ensure that staff was recruited to service these fire stations. You didn't buy the equipment to operationalize these fire stations. What they now had to do was to go and take fire tests from other stations that had spare, right? To facilitate, to avoid what happened in Siparia a couple of weeks, last week. They now had to take a fire tender from there, the spare, and send it to service now one of these fire stations. So you diluted the stock of fire tenders, putting these other fire stations in a situation where if the main fire tender down, the one that you have down, where you had two before, or in some cases three, you don't have one because you had to send one to Penal, you had to send one to Woodbrook, you had to send one to Lady Hales Avenue, you had to send one to Mayaro, right? Yes, to service, because how are you going to look, you have a big fire station, no fire tender, if a fire take place. They're going to say, but look at our fire station there, so why you all don't have a tender? But they wouldn't talk to say, well, the reason why it happened is because we did not equip these fire stations. But it makes sense because they're building, right? So that is why today they support us. Because say, well, the People's Partnership they build fire station and they build police station and they build hospital and they build this, that, the other, and the next. That's why they could talk that talk. But the logistics that is required to operationalize these fire stations and other buildings that they build. No talk about that. You hear anybody in the UNC say the chief fire officer lie? Have any member of the media contacted Mrs. Prasad Bissessa or any one of the 5 ministers of national security that she had between 2010 to 2015 to corroborate what was said by the chief fire officer? No. And you know what? 9-day wonder. This will blow away and some other story will come and we will forget about that. But they will continue to persecute the Minister of National Security and say it's his fault. It's his fault that we have this situation. Now, Prasad Bissessa said on Monday night, I am told, always advised, never informed, that the Siparia fire station has been without a tender for the last month. She said that on Monday night. When was she told this? In the wake of the unfortunate incident, right? So before the fire took place that took the lives of this mother and daughter, she wasn't told as the member of parliament that the Siparia fire station had no fire tender. Nobody at the Siparia fire station saw it fit to make representation to the member of parliament to say, well, look, you don't have a fire tender here. If a fire happens, we can't treat with it. It wasn't important. It wasn't an issue. It's a small thing. Yeah? She's a member of parliament for the area and don't know what is happening in her constituency. Because perhaps if she had sought to have herself informed rather than advised, maybe she could have made representation to the relevant authorities. Not necessarily the Minister of National Security. Perhaps she could have sought his intervention. But at the end of the day, the management of the resources of the fire service rests with the chief fire officer. The Minister of National Security, notwithstanding the fact that the fire services falls under his remit, he can't pick up the phone and call the fire officer and say, well, the chief fire officer and say, well, here, what now? You need to send a fire truck to Siparia. You need to send one here. Because he is not familiar with the day-to-day operations of the fire services. And they would manage their resources based on the needs that they have assessed. The Minister of National Security can't call the chief fire officer and tell him, here, what? Take some officers from Rising Road and send them Woodbrook. He can't do that. The chief fire officer has certain responsibilities, certain authority, which the Minister of National Security cannot interfere with. And if it is, and I recall the one time when I did an interview with the Minister of Public Utilities, Marvin Gonzalez, when I was still at 91.9, he made the point that contrary to popular belief, a minister cannot pick up the phone and call an entity or an enterprise that falls under their ministry and give orders in terms of operations. That is illegal. Because if the minister is allowed to do that, then he can pick up the phone and call any of these entities and say, well, here, what I want you to give a contract to so and so. He could do that, but you can't. It would be illegal to do that, and the minister could find himself facing a charge for doing that. But the UNC would give you the impression, and that is why when Fitzgerald Hines made the statement that it is not his responsibility to, it's not his responsibility to ensure the safety of the citizens of the country. And the point that he was making, which was misconstrued, is that my job is policy. My job is to provide the entities who are directly charged with responsibility for security to ensure that they have everything that they need. I cannot tell the commissioner of police how to do his or her job. I cannot tell the chief fire officer how to do his job. I cannot tell the head of the army, the head of the defense force, how to do his job. I can't do that. All I could do, right, is they come to me, they tell me they need this, they need that in order to be able to function properly. My job is to go to the cabinet and say, look, the fire service needs this, the police service needs that, the defense force needs this, we need to get it done. I need approval, I need money to be able to provide. The police need guns, that's my work, to get them that. The police need cameras, my job is to get them that. The police need cars, anything that they need to do their job effectively, my job is to ensure that they have that. But in terms of their day-to-day operations, I cannot interfere. Lest it be said that I'm trying to micromanage these entities and that they have become political stooges, because then I could tell the police, go and lock up this one and go and lock up that one. Or I could tell the chief of defense staff to send some of his officers to engage in some kind of extrajudicial something or the other. I cannot intervene in the day-to-day operations. So therefore, if these entities are not functioning as they should, I am limited in what I could do in terms of interventions. Yes, we can have a meeting with the heads of these institutions, these entities, and express to them the government's displeasure with how they may be functioning, and to hear from them what are their plans to improve. But the extent, the remit of the minister in terms of giving instructions as to how these entities are to perform, his hands or her hands are tied. Right? But I don't understand that. So the members of the literati only happy to hear the leadership of the party jam Mr. Hines and jam the government, and the government ain't doing this and the government ain't doing that. Right? And we running with that, not understanding what the government can and cannot do, what a minister can and cannot do. Right? But again, I make the point that the chief fire officer has indicated that a significant part of the problem why they are where they are now is because there were a number of fire stations built and nothing was put in place equipment-wise to operationalize these fire stations. You put the problem on me now and whoever the leadership of the fire services was at that time to now use the scarce resources that we already had, right? How many fire tenders did the People's Partnership buy between 2010 to 2015? These are the questions that the media should be asking. Because since you all want to chastise this government for not spending the money, when you all claimed, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar is on record as having claimed, her government had the highest energy revenues in this country's history. In other words, she had more energy revenues than Eric Williams. She had more energy revenues than Chambers. She had more energy revenues than Patrick Manning. She had more energy revenues than A.N.R. Robinson, right? She had more energy revenues than Basdio Pandey. And you know, they love to talk about how the PNM went through 2 oil booms and the money went through the country like a dose of salt. But she's telling you, even with 2 oil booms under the PNM, the administration that I led had the highest energy revenues in this country's history. My government had more energy revenues than the PNM during the 2 oil booms. That is what she said. And if you doubt me, go back to, I think it would have been, was it 2019, 20, thereabout. When Dr. Rowley had, he did his presentation, he did a presentation, I think it was carried 2 nights or so, I recall. I was out of the country at the time. On national television, where he had this board, this white one he was going through and showing people the energy revenues and so on. And after the first night, when he did it the first night, Kamala Prasad-Bissessar called a press conference the next day, even the following day, and she made that statement. The government which I led had the highest energy revenues in this country's history. She said that. And she also sought to challenge the claim of the 3 days money in the treasury to run the country. And to debunk that claim, she highlighted 2 things to show that the country had money. The country's foreign reserves, which stood at that time at just over 10 billion. And she said the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. To say, well, no, they lied. There was money in the treasury to run the country, so that when they tell you it only that Joala Rambaran told Coleman, but there was only 3 days of money, that was a lie. Look, we had money here and we had money there. And of course, the supporters ran with that. They ran with that, not understanding or deliberately choosing to ignore the fact the country's foreign reserves is not there to pay for the country's day-to-day operations. Because the same UNC, right? The same UNC is today telling you that the government running down the country's foreign reserves. And I come into that just now when I get into their manifesto for 2020, 2025, right? They're telling you this government draining the country's foreign reserves. But by the same token, out of the same mouth, a couple of years ago, it's telling you, they lie, it had money to run the country because the country's foreign reserves had 10 billion. How does the country's foreign reserves operate? The country's foreign reserves is built up primarily from the taxes and royalties that are paid by the energy companies. The law requires that the energy companies pay their taxes and royalties and other duties in US dollars, right? They are allowed, however, to pay up to 25% of their taxes, royalties, and other fees to the state in TT dollars. But at least, right, at least 75% of these taxes, duties, royalties must be paid in US dollars. The other 25% takes into consideration the fact that these companies will have, that they are paid in US dollars when they sell the oil, sell the gas, as the case may be. But in receiving US dollars, they pay for their overhead expenses in TT dollars. So they pay their salaries for the majority of their staff in TT dollars, and so therefore they have to convert some of this US to TT dollars to pay their staff and the other expenses, to pay their bills, the utility bills, and so on. And so the government says, well, okay, Fine. Taking that into consideration, we will allow you to sell some of your US up to 25%, and you can pay us that in TT. But the rest, 75% at least, must be paid in US dollar. And so that is how the country's foreign reserves builds up, right? What the main contributor to the decline in the country's foreign reserves has been, one, the demand for everything foreign by the citizens of this country. When you use your credit card online, the remittances have to be paid in US dollars by the banks. When you travel abroad and you use your credit card, right, whatever you spend has to be paid for. The bank has to settle these remittances, has to settle these bills in US dollars. So you don't consider that, you know, I have my credit card, this is my limit, swipe, whatever. But when it is that bill comes to the bank from the foreign entity, the bank of the business that you would have purchased that, this local bank with whom you have your credit card, they have to settle those bills in US dollars. So that when the central bank sells the banks, the commercial banks, US, the commercial bank will keep a portion of this US to pay these bills. When it is that you go online, as I said, and you make online purchases again with your credit card, even though it may register on your credit card as TT, it has to be paid for in US dollars. And so your bank has to find US dollars to pay that. Now, if it is that the banks aren't getting US dollars, so the banks would get US dollars from two main places. One, when these energy companies sell US to the banks to pay their local bills. Remittances, when foreigners come in and they have US and they go to the bank to change it, or you get a little caca that some family member of yours come down and they give you some US and you decide to go to the bank and change it, right? This is how the banks basically get. Or they will buy US from the central bank. The central bank manages the country's foreign reserves. And so when there is a shortage of US, the central bank now will draw down on the country's foreign reserves to sell US to the commercial banks. The commercial banks, in buying this US now, will then give it to the customers who come. So you have businesses who require US, and the bank has to manage it. So they will decide, okay, who are we giving? What are we giving priority to? When they start running out, if we're not getting insufficient US from the energy companies, if we're not getting insufficient US from foreign remittances from persons who are coming in with hard cash over the counter, then we have to run to the central bank to beg them to give us some from the country's foreign reserves. In addition to that, before this administration came in 2015, in the lead up to the 2015 general election, the Minister of Finance, he wasn't Minister of Finance yet, Carl Mimbert, and they would be, talking on the, and even after he became, he said that a PNM government would be prepared to allow the country's exchange rate to slide to anywhere between $6.75 to $6.80. And thereafter, the government would intervene using the country's foreign reserves to defend that exchange rate. So in other words, when the demand for foreign exchange gets to the point where it puts a strain on the exchange rate, and if there is no government intervention, through market forces, the exchange rate will then continue to slide to $7, $7.50, $8. The government is prepared to use some of the country's foreign reserves to provide supply of US dollars into the local banking system so that the banks could have US to provide and maintain that exchange rate of between 675 to 680. Hence the reason, since 2015 to now, that has been the average exchange rate. But as I will read for you just now, that is not what the UNC is offering. Understand that as recently as 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Finance would have indicated that he is not prepared to devalue the TT dollar because of the impact that will have on the economy. That if you allow it to devalue, it means the US dollar is going to become more expensive. And so all of these companies and entities that are importing goods into the country, because they will now have to pay more for US dollars, they're going to mark it up on the price at which they sell their goods. So that inflation is going to go up. You, the average citizen, will have to pay more for these foreign goods. And it's not just finished foreign products I'm talking about here. Remember, even some of our local manufacturers have foreign imports, ingredients in the products that they create here. So like Matux and all of these other companies, National Canners and so on, all of the local manufacturers like Associated Brands and all these people, Devon and stuff, who produce stuff here, when they import the ingredients, when they import some of the input, if the price goes up, if the price of the US, if the TT dollar is allowed to devalue, then these imports are going to become more expensive. And so even the products that are manufactured here becomes more expensive. Inflation and the price of everything goes up. But the UNC ain't talking that, No. As I will read for you just now. Anyway, we come into that. So that is what they were offering you, right? So, but I just digressed a little bit to come into that just now. Because it's one other thing I wanted to touch on before I get to that, right? So with respect to the whole fire service thing, that they continue to push and that whole narrative, rather than express their condolences and so on, they're seeking to prostitute this unfortunate incident to try and get political mileage, right? Because I see Kamala Prasad-Bissessar on her Facebook page posted up the article that was published by the newspaper that the government spent $60 million to investigate Munilal and Anil Roberts. Munilal with EMBD, Anil Roberts with Life Sport and so on, but they can't find the money to buy fire tenders. Understand that we are in the situation that we are in today because of what they would have done 2010 to 2015. All right? Let me deal with issue number 2. The title of our Facebook page is Debunking UNC Lies with Facts. And one of the lies or the misrepresentations that have been perpetrated by the UNC over the last few years has been the issue of, and Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar made reference to it on last week, Monday, that the PNM likes to nationalize stuff and then close it down, right? Costing people their jobs and affecting the country and the economy. Now, they have a meme that they created since 2017, 2018, showing all the things that they say the PNM shut down. And the first thing they have is the railway. The second thing they have is Carney 1975 Limited. And then the third thing they added to that was Petrotrim, right? I just want to touch on the first one today, the railway. Now, with respect to that, I know I've always seen that claim of the UNC and on their Facebook page, kick out the PNM. But that was long before my time, right? Long before my time. So I saw this, but I wasn't seized of the information with respect to that. So I couldn't really respond to it when I see them post it up. But I saw that again, and I want to thank some of the content creators for this page who would have posted up recently a snippet of an article that was done by a gentleman by the name of one Glenn Beadon, who is a researcher, and he would have published an article with respect to the history of the rail system in Trinidad. And there was something that I found interesting. I went and did further reading, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention. So again, when next you see them making this claim, you could let them know what the facts are. Right. So let me get it here. All right, let me see. Read it for me. The railway line to San Fernando became known as the Southern Main Line, and it settled into 83 years of existence. And despite prosperous beginnings for the TGR, let me read that again. Despite prosperous beginnings, the TGR began running into financial difficulties in the years leading up to 1920, when for the first time it lost money. And TGR is the Trinidad Government Railway, right? So since 1920, the Trinidad Railway has started to run into financial difficulties, right? For the first time it lost money in 1920. How old was Eric Williams at that time? PNM wasn't even a thought at that time, right? Wasn't even PNM came into existence 36 years later after this. But they want to tell you the PNM like to shut down everything, nationalize and shut down, according to Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar, who on Monday night didn't know what is the opposite of nationalize. As she know now. Apparently, so she and plenty of them in the crowd didn't know either. Over the years of its existence, there were several economic inquiries into the operations of the railway, all designed to review the financial position of the department. The early reviews happened in 1922 and again in 1932. These report recommendations were carried out with little or no success. 1922, 1932, right? That was long before the majority, if not all of you who listening here, were even a thought. Survival of fortunes with an increased traffic on the railway and corresponding improvement. In 1941, the Americans arrived and heavy reliance was placed on the railway to build and supply their new airbase at Walla, where a branch line was laid from a junction with the Trinidad Government Railway main line near Komuto. This improved matters considerably and is regarded by many as a reason. This improved matters considerably and is regarded by many as the reason why the railway was retained for as long as it was after 1948. So it was only because of World War II that the railway, the Trinidad Railway, the government railway, got a little extension of life. But as we see here from inquiries that were done between 1922 and 1932, that is where they were heading. Eric Williams wasn't in government yet. He was a little boy going to school or thereabouts. But anyway, I continue. The spike in activity did not last long, as increased motor vehicle usage on the island took away transportation market share from the railway. This in turn forced a permanent decline. Permanent decline. So from 1948 come forward, people started to buy motor car, and nobody want to travel on the train no more. That is I above that. Motor car come in town now. Well, we reach. I go and buy a motor car. Everybody want to drive. Same like you're seeing today. Some household you have 5, 6, 7 car. Everybody in the house driving car. Yeah, some of them working in the same place in the same vicinity, but everybody want to go. They know about carpool. Despite efforts to arrest this decline by successive administrations, by 1950 the railway was in deep trouble once again. 1950, PNM born yet. PNM came about 6 years later, but it's the PNM fault, and the PNM shut down the railway. This is what they want to tell you. On the 12th of March 1953 came the first closure announcements whereby the Arima to Sangre Grande, San Fernando to Portsdown, and San Fernando to Siparia were all to lose their passenger rail services. 1953, PNM born yet. 1953, yeah, but it's the PNM fault. The PNM shut down the railway. That's all the PNM knows to do, to shut down everything. Despite the closures which took effect to shut down everything. Despite the closures which took effect on April 1st, 1953, the line to San Fernando had escaped the cuts, but the situation was far from over and the railway continued in decline. Still in decline. In 1956, the government again brought in another expert, Arthur Jessup, from the British Transport Commission, to have yet another look at the situation. So they had commission 1920, 1922, 1932, and in spite of the fact that all of these commissions said, this really making sense. So they can't salvage that. We are now in 1956. And they're still trying to save it. By now, the PNM board. I continue. Arthur Jessup arrived in Trinidad on the 9th of January 1956 and immediately set about compiling his investigation. The now famous Jessup report was submitted on the 25th of April 1956. The Trinidad Guardian published the following item. The report of the British transport consultant, Mr. Arthur Jessup, who spent 9 weeks here, proposes the gradual closing down and eventual complete abolition of the 80-year-old Trinidad government rail system. Who? Mr. Jessup, from Britain. He wasn't in Trinidad, so he don't know about PNM yet. And as I said, PNM now come on the scene. 1956, right? And he, in 1956, corroborated what was recommended in 1920, in 1922, in 1932, right? He come 30-some odd years later and tell them the same thing that was told to them by other commissions prior to. But it's the PNM fault, is Eric Williams, he lack of foresight. PNM had no sense, it's Balize juice. Right. The report of the British transport consultant, Mr. Arthur Jessup, who spent 9 weeks here, proposes the gradual closing down and eventual complete abolition of the 80-year-old Trinidad government rail system. Mr. Jessup refers to the serious decline in passenger traffic, plus a stagnant goods traffic situation, which cost the railway $18 million in the last 11 years. $18 million, we talking about 1956 here. You know what $18 million was back then? Plenty money. And the railway lost $18 million in 11 years. So if we go back from 1956, 11 years, down to 1945, you want $18 million in 1945? Hello. Anyway, despite the Jessup report, here it is. The railway soldiered on into 1960, enter the PNM. The then Chief Minister, Dr. the Right Honorable Eric Williams, head of the PNM party, was all too aware of the TGR's position as a substantial employer on the island. So Eric Williams' first concern was for employment. He was concerned if we shut down the railway, plenty of people will lose their work, right? And he was inclined, even though the railway was losing money, we can't afford to have all these people lose their work. This was the primary concern of Eric Williams in 1960. We weren't an independent yet. We're still under Her Majesty, Elizabeth II. Right? I continue. On the 17th of June 1956, the PNM arranged an excursion by rail to visit the country's rail network, by then in a very poor state. Approximately 800 people, mostly PNM party supporters, took part in the excursion. It has been suggested that the PNM was initially opposed to scrapping the railway. The PNM was initially opposed to scrapping the railway, contrary to what the UNC want to be telling you and kick out the PNM, that all the PNMs do shut down thing. The PNM was opposed to it. Dr. Williams told the people that taking away the railway would create a disaster on the roads, which could not bear the pressure. And his message was either use the railway or lose it. So all who wanted to buy motor car in 1960 and abandon the rail system, Dr. Williams was pleading to them over earlier. Don't buy car yet now. Some all I know they can afford car, but still take the rail system now because we need the money. In order for the rail system to live, all you have to use it so that the money that we get in from the tickets and so on could keep it alive, because the government can't afford to support this thing on its own. And it don't make sense that the government pump money into a rail system that nobody ain't using, because everybody want to buy a motor car and everybody want to travel in motor car. They take in private, it's taxi now. So nobody ain't want to jump on no rail, no train again. It's taxi. Jump in these nice cars then, right? All these fancy cars that was coming from the US and wherever. Williams pleaded with them, telling them, is it all they use it or lose it or no? If all they ain't using it, it makes no sense. We have no choice but to shut it down. If all they want it, use it. I continue. In November of 1963, there was yet another report, the Madery report. This report was commissioned only a matter of months after the famous Beeching report in the United Kingdom that was to eventually close 1/3 of Britain's railway network. So it wasn't only in Trinidad. In the UK at that time, they were shutting down the rail system. They were saying, cars coming on the scene now, buses. So we don't need the rail system anymore. So notwithstanding the Jessup report, Dr. Williams again commissioned another report, the Madery report, in 1963 in an attempt to save the rail system. So it shows that the PNM was not inclined to get rid of the rail system. They did everything that they could to save it, begging the citizens to use it. We commissioned another report hoping that they would say something different and tell us, okay, yes, you could salvage the rail system. But the same thing, the Madery report said the same thing that the Jessup report said. And that was said in 1922 and 1932, that this rail system ain't making sense or they're losing money, shut it down. But Dr. Williams was clearly a visionary, because the very thing that he told the people would have happened back then in 1962, 63, is what we see in today, the pressure on the roads with all the cars. Hence the reason some of the road network is in the state that it is in. Because everybody and their dog want to buy a car. But you can't blame them, because the public transport service is to a large extent unreliable. We have buses, but if it is that the buses are not running on time, and we have all of this traffic congestion on the bus route, where so many maxis have bus route passes, right? So that too impacts, because it still have, even though the bus route is ready for buses, certain private cars that have authority to use it, and the maxis, it's still at times, depending at peak times in the morning, you have traffic. So, but if everybody and cars could buy cars, well, all right. So again, the demand for the use of buses. We see what is happening to the road network today. But Dr. Williams saw this, and let me repeat that. Dr. Williams told the people that taking away the railway would create a disaster on the roads which could not bear the pressure. This is in 1963. 60 years ago. 60 years ago, Dr. Williams predicted this. And we're seeing it today. But we want to blame the government for the state of it. It has nothing to do with everybody want a car, right? Nothing to do with it. The Robert Madery report repeated many of the sentiments of the previous inquiries. The railway, rolling stock, and motive power were pronounced to be largely obsolete, and vast sums of money would have been needed to replace them. The report emphasized that the road transport had already proven cheaper and more versatile in handling people and goods, and recommended that the only viable economic alternative was closure of the railway. Closure of the railway. This is what the PNM was told. This is what Dr. Williams was told, despite his desire to maintain the railway, despite him wanting to avoid having pressure put on the road system, despite his pleading to the people, oh gosh, shall I use the railway system? Please, please. The government cannot carry it alone. And it don't make sense that you're funding a rail system and most of the cars empty. This is the extent, the depths to which Dr. Williams and the PNM went to save the railway system, contrary to what the UNC is telling you now. Following the report, the government decided to phase out the railway and to concentrate on buses. The Trinidad government rail system at that time had already been providing an ancillary service of connecting buses for some time. The government signaled its intention towards buses by the establishment of PTSC on the 21st of November 1964. Which government did that? The PNM. 1964 established PTSC, right? The Public Transport Service Corporation. But somehow the UNC like to rewrite history. PNM in power. They was in government for 50 years. And what they do? Nothing. Kamala was in power for 5 years and she do more than the PNM do in 50 years. In the 66 years that the PNM in existence, Kamala and Pandey together do more than the PNM did. Really? Who established PTSC? Who established the Unit Trust? Asking who established NIB? Who established First Citizens Bank? Who established Petrotrin? By the consolidation of all of these private entities. Who did all of these things? But you see, when they want to rewrite history and make it seem as if the PNM, the money, too oil boom and it passed through like a dose of salt. Really? Who built the Twin Towers? Who did that? UNC did that, eh? The NAR did that? Okay. We're going again. Right. The Trinidad Guardian on 11th April 1965 declared the railway to go in stages and the fate had been sealed. The days of the government railways were numbered. Closure of the southern main line to San Fernando and the Caparo Valley line to Rio Claro took place on the 30th of August 1965. Again, there was much criticism and demonstrations, but the closures went ahead. The TGR not only had 3 more years to go before final abandonment of all passenger train services. And rail passenger services in Trinidad slipped into history as the final train ran into Port of Spain, 28 December 1968, and so became a part of Trinidad we once knew. So that's the truth, that's the facts there. So it wasn't that the PNM just wake up, Eric Williams wake up one morning and say, hey, we're getting rid of the train system, now we bring in bus and gas. No. He tried his best, his damnedest to save it, notwithstanding the fact that he had several reports before that all recommended the closure of the rail system. He still tried to keep it alive. And when water, mud, and flour, and everybody kept saying it had to go, he had no choice. He begged the citizens to use it, and if they're using it, they want to use the bus and they want to use cars. Well, then what do they want me to do? Pump money into something that just there? Fast forward, how many years later, Patrick Manning want to implement or to introduce the rapid rail system? One of the main characteristics of a modern society, right? Think of, had that been done when Patrick Manning proposed that over 10 years ago. I'm saying over 10 years ago. What, 13 years ago? 15 years. It could have either been completed by now or almost completed. What was the UNC chant? They want no rapid rail. But the government spent 500 million on a feasibility study. And this rapid rail going to cost 60 billion. Right? It's not that the money was going to be sourced one time from the coffers of the government. It would have been funded over a series of budgets. There would have been some borrowing, yes, and some of it would have come from the public purse. Now, they had a problem with the government funding the rapid rail from the public purse, but these are the same people who took $7 billion from the treasury to build a highway. Unheard of. Unheard of. Never before in the history of this country did a government take so much money from the treasury to build anything. And they took $7 billion from the treasury to build a highway. Why? Because to take a loan from the IADB meant that the project would have been under intense scrutiny by the IADB. And so any kind of bubble, any hint of a bubble taking place there, the IADB would have intervened because we lent you this money. So if it is we take the 7 billion and this is a project that is managed solely and entirely by the government, well, the IADB had no business in that, so we could run whatever racket and bubble we want. we could overprice. So we're acquiring the lands along the way because we need to displace people who live in the path of the highway. So what do? We pay everybody in the house for the same plot of land. So we say, all right, we do an evaluation, and they said this piece of land here worth $1 million. How many people live in this house? 7? 1 million each. So you pay 7 million for a piece of land valued at 1 million. Same thing with Eden Gardens. You pay 175 million for a piece of land valued at 52. But hey, this is a government project. We have no outsiders involved in this. This is being funded from the Treasury of Trinidad and Tobago. And so therefore, nobody could come and interfere. So we could run whatever racket we want to run. Thief. Yeah? So much people laughing all the way to the bank. Everybody in the house, and this is something that was commonplace. So several householders, not just one family, several would have been compensated for the same property under them. Right? And that was normal, as we say. Nothing wrong with that. Still, we did the Commission of Inquiry into that. Hopefully that will get underway soon, so that we could hear more of the racket that took place. Imagine 8 years after these people left office, the bubble that they would have engaged in is still being unearthed. And I am sure that there's still a lot more that took place between 2010 and 2015 that we don't know about. Plenty. They ain't come to light yet. Right? But they're asking us to get them 5 more years so that they could top up that. That's the railway system. So, on another day, we will deal with currently 1975 Limited. But I want to get into, quickly, in the interest of time, and see how time flies. As I said, I wanted to interrogate some of what the UNC offers you as good governance. Should you put them back in office in 2025, right? Because from the utterances on the Monday Night Forum, it is clear that the same manifesto that they offered you in 2020 is the same one they're coming back with in 2025. Maybe just 1 or 2 little adjustments there, but they believe in the 5 pillars, or the 5 principles. They believe in the 12 pillars, the Johnny Walker economic plan, the green economy, the blue economy, the gold economy, all of that. Yeah. So they're sticking with that. They hug it up. They wedded to it. So expect that the 2025 manifesto will be basically a rehash of 2020. All right? The only thing they might change the cover, but it's the same thing. Let's interrogate some of that. Monetary and exchange rate policy, as I mentioned to you all just now, this government took a decision since 2015 that they would not devalue the TT dollar because they know the impact that would have on the wider economy and the standard of living and the cost of living in this country. Common sense. If it is more expensive to buy US and be importing a lot of stuff, and most of the foreign goods that we buy, the remittance is in US dollars, right? Monetary and exchange rate policy. This is page 56 of 120 in the UNC's 2020 manifesto. Here what it says. The UNC recognizes that the conduct of monetary and exchange policy falls exclusively under the purview of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. A new UNC government will commit to the following to help protect our country's external position. So they recognize that the management of the country's foreign exchange regime is the purview and the remit of the Central Bank. But they want to interfere. You see why it is that they wanted Jawala? That's why they wanted Jawala there. And they were opposed to Jawala being fired. Same Jawala. There what it says. A new UNC government will commit to the following to help protect our country's external position. 1, work with the central bank to ensure a competitive exchange rate. And of course, you need to have a central bank governor who is compliant. The Ministry of Finance will work with the central bank to ensure Trinidad and Tobago's exchange rate is competitive. Talk about oxymoron. Eliminating the current dirty managed float and allowing market forces to operate within a crawling band. The transition to a more balanced foreign exchange market will be supported by an opening up of the foreign market allocation system to allow for a far more equitable distribution of foreign exchange, especially to small and medium businesses and the general public. You hear what they're saying there? It was identified. No, let me deal with this part first. Eliminating the current dirty managed float and allowing market forces to operate within a crawling band. When the Manning administration, back in the 90s, we started the floating exchange rate system, right? It wasn't entirely floated. The government recognized the need to continue to manage it, to intervene. And so what they would have done is use, again, since the 90s, countries' foreign reserves to provide supply where there is a significant shortage, where the disparity between demand and supply is great, that they would use the country's foreign reserves in the absence of other sources to be able to manage the exchange rate. And it's called a dirty float. It's called dirty because the government is using the country's foreign reserves to prop up the exchange rate rather than just allow the exchange rate to manage using market forces, right? So, and this has been the policy of the PNM, which is why the exchange rate today is 680, 670 something, 680, and not $10, as the UNC is proposing here, where they say, and let me repeat it, the Ministry of Finance will work with the central bank to ensure Trinidad and Tobago's exchange rate is competitive, eliminating the current dirty managed float and allowing market forces to operate with a crawling ban. In other words, we are not prepared to take any of the country's foreign reserves to provide any supply to the commercial banks. So let it be that the commercial banks get their foreign exchange either from the purchase of US from the energy companies or remittances, people, average citizen walking off of the street and bringing you hard US currency in exchange for TT dollars. But we, the government, is not prepared. All we want to do is to build up the country's foreign reserve. Build it up, build it up, build it up. So we can say, yes, look, the country's foreign reserves under the PNM are 7 billion, but look, we take it to 10 billion and 15 billion and 20 billion. And you have all this foreign reserves sit down there. It's like somebody who have plenty of money in the bank, right? And they're living in a shack. They have the money there to fix the house, but they don't want to fix it. You know why? Because they love to be able to go in the bank and push in their bank card. And when the receipt come out, they like to say, hey, yes, I have $500,000 in the bank. Boy, I love seeing that. Yeah, I have $1 million in the bank. Yes. So you're watching the money in the bank. It just sit down there. You ain't doing it, but you're not using it for any meaningful purpose. You have a need for it, you know. Your house on 4 stilts. It leans so. Every time rain falls, they're playing musical chairs because the ceiling, the roof leaking. So you're only moving chairs here depending on where the leak is today. And you had the money sit down in the bank and you don't want to use it to fix your house. It's the same thing the UNC proposing here. So we will build the foreign reserves. Yes? As we collect money from the energy companies, we'll stockpile the foreign reserves and watch it. And from the energy companies, we'll stockpile the foreign reserves and watch it and say yes. And we can beat pictures every time we have a meeting and say, look how high the country's foreign reserve is under us. And under the PM, it wasn't so high. Meanwhile, the bank's starving for foreign exchange. Manufacturers starving for foreign exchange. The average citizen is starving for foreign exchange, complaining that when they need to travel, they can't get money. The bank only want to give you 200 US or 100 US. And you have a stockpile of foreign reserves there, just so the government can beat their chest and say, look how high the foreign reserves is. This is what they are telling you that they would do if you put them back into office in 2025. So if you think that the shortage of foreign exchange is acute now, put them back in 2025 and see what happens. Because they're telling you, we're not using the country's foreign reserves to prop up no dirty float. The government is not going to intervene. Let the demand and supply, the forces of demand and supply, determine the exchange rate. That's what they're telling you. Media and pick up and talking on that. The men and women of letters, the economists and them, who are supposed to scrutinize this, to tell you, because they know the average citizen ain't going and read no manifesto. They just go in and they go a meeting and they want to talk what they want to talk. Well, as Kamala say, as she told her supporters some time ago, I know you all don't like when I talk about serious issues. Of course they don't, because it goes over their head. They don't understand what the hell you're talking about. They prefer when you come and pick on and who thief and how much they thief and bundles and who is minister man and who sleep with who. That's what they come to these meetings to hear. But they don't want to hear no talk about economics. They're not interested in that. So don't talk that talk. Because when she started talk that talk, they yawn in. When she started talk that talk, all of a sudden, they started to envision the cooler in the trunk. Yeah, that's what they're thinking about. The cooler in the trunk when she started to talk serious business about economics and so. Never mind this trashy talking. But anyway, so that's one. Two, the transition to a more balanced foreign exchange market will be supported by an opening up of the foreign market allocation system to allow for a far more equitable distribution of foreign exchange, especially to small and medium businesses and the general public. This is what they did between 2010 to 2015, when their central bank governor, Joala Rambaran, decided to tinker with what was the previous established distribution network, where entities that fell under the central bank, such as the commercial banks and the Bureau de Change, MoneyGram, Western Union, and these different entities, right? So the entities that fall under the central bank responsibility, so they could manage it. They decided, here what? We're going to give license to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, Jenny, and Jane to sell foreign exchange and to be able to make a demand on the central bank. So instead of just the commercial banks and the other few entities who have licenses to trade in foreign exchange, because to do so, even you as an average citizen, you can't just say, well, look, I have 10,000 US and I want to sell it. All right? That is why they have limits on how much US you could bring into the country, and you have to declare it on the form when you're coming in. So that even if you have 10,000 US or 5,000 US or whatever, start somewhere, you taking that and selling it, technically you're committing a crime, because you need to have a license to do them thing. All right? So they decided to give license to Tom, Dick, Harry, Jenny, Jane, and the dog. People who did not fall under the remit of the central bank, and therefore the central bank had no control over who these people were selling the US to. So in other words, we create up on it, right? So and so come and say, well, Kamla, let's what's going on, girl? You know how long I beaten on some US to bring in this and bring in that. All right, don't worry. I will call Joala, you'll get a license. You could get how much US it is that you want, and you could handle your story. And we'll say that you are a foreign exchange trader. Right? You want a license? Look. You want one too? Look. So you could go and get your US directly from the central bank, and you don't have to worry. Forget Republic and Royal and all of them and telling you could only get 2,000 and they have you on a waiting line list for 2 or 3 months. We'll give you a license and you go directly to the central bank and fix your mix. And you don't have to worry and hoot up my head. That's what they did. So that when these people go and they get the money of the US from central bank now, they have a license. They won't get them. But we don't know who they're selling it to. We don't know how much they're selling it for. Right? We don't know if they're hoarding it. So that they're creating an artificial shortage by buying the US dollars and hoarding it wherever it is they hold the hard cash and hoarding it wherever it is that they're hoarding it, creating now a situation of an artificial shortage to some extent, so that you squeeze the government's cojones to the point where if the government realizes, look, this managed flow, this dirty flow is decreasing the country's foreign reserve at a faster rate than we would like. And if it is because of the decline in energy production, we're not getting the amount of US remittances that we normally would get from these energy companies, we would have no choice in an effort to preserve the country's foreign reserves. We will have to allow the dollar to depreciate. So if we say we're removing the dirty float and the TT dollar now depreciates against the US such that it is no longer 680 to 1, but 10 to 1, all of these people all of a sudden who have all this hard US currency that they hoard and they're just buying it, not because they have use for it, no. They need to create the artificial source. Take it out of the system. Hoard it wherever it is that they're hoarding it. And then when the TT dollar depreciates to maybe 10 to 1, they come now to sell it and make a significant profit between what they would have paid for it, $677, $680, and the $10 that they now could sell it for, because that is, they could sell it on the legitimate market because that is the established price. This is what they're telling you here. We want to give license to everybody. Put us back in office exactly what Joala Rambaran did, that Coleman Booth undid. We're going to do it back again. And we'll get rid of Hele and we'll probably put back Joala. We need to put somebody there who's pliable to what we want to do. Not somebody who's going to use their academic qualifications and understanding of how fiscal and monetary policy works to advise us to tell us, well, they don't think this is a good idea. We just need somebody who there, sitting in the chair, who when we say, we do this, they'll say, no problem. That's what they want? All right, no problem, no worries. Done, consider it done. Without any care or regard for the wider community. They would have said, well, we had no choice to do that because we had to preserve the country's foreign reserves. Why do we have foreign reserves? What's the purpose? Import cover. We need to make sure that we have sufficient money there so that the government has enough foreign reserves to be able to pay for things like medication and food and all the other things that we import for a period of time. International best practice says that you should have anywhere between 3 to 5 months of import cover is acceptable. Right now we are about 8 months, right? Again, because of the fact that there has been a decline in oil revenues, there has been a decline in natural gas revenues. Why? Because of a decline in supply. So we're not selling as much natural gas as we used to. We're not selling as much oil as we used to. We need to find new oil and new gas, which is why the dragon deal is so important. But all the UNC want to talk about, they're not telling the benefits of it, you know. The focus is, well, this government know that 2 years, they can't do nothing in 2 years. And they want to tell you about Delcy and how Delcy come here during COVID. And what's the guy named? Wilma Ruperti. That's all Andy Roberts could talk about, Delcy and Wilma. Instead of promoter telling the supporters, well, look, this is a good thing because we love country. This is a good thing. This could benefit. They ain't talking that up. It's only Wilma Ruperti and the oil and Delcy come here. And the 4 divers who lost their life, White had oil in that decommissioned pipeline. That's what, to stir up controversy, bacchanal, and couture. That's what they got for. But to promote the good things, we ain't talking that. Why? Because to promote that means that the government will look good. And as Basdio Pandey said, it is not the job of the opposition to make the government look good. But this is what they're offering you here, right? This is what they're offering you here. So one, they are prepared to remove the dirty float or the managed float as it's called. They will not use the country's foreign reserves to provide supply of foreign exchange to the market, which is going to exacerbate the shortage system, as we saw taking place under them, because when Joala did what he did, we saw that even though you had a situation of a shortage before, it became more acute based on that. Because if you have a limited amount of foreign reserves to share, and you increase the number of players, it means that there's less for the banks, less for the people, the entities that were previously authorized to sell US dollars, which is only going to make the problems worse. Because if it is that you give licenses to everybody, but you didn't tell me who you give these licenses to, so I don't know who to go to buy US, other than the bank and the other entities that I know about. But you all give license to this one, that one, the next one, and there is no advertisement. Or if you put out the advertisement once, and that is it. So I don't know that I could go to this place to get US. So when I go there, it's but they're holding on to it to give who they want to give, right? And therefore, you're depleted. But they want to, anyway. So that's two things to look out for, right? If you're inclined to give them your vote in 2025, or if you're inclined to withhold your vote because you're vexed with the PNM and by default, they end up in office, understand. One, the exchange rate is going to slide, the TT dollar will be devalued. It's going to become more expensive to purchase US. Your cost of living is going to go up. And two, they intend to continue the policy that they instituted before between 2010 to 2015 to increase the number of players in the foreign exchange market to give them licenses, as is indicated here. This is 2020. I go on. I feel, well, I might just be able to deal with two other things today, right? In the interest of time. Here, this other one. The government intends to, a UNC government will request the central bank to raise interest rates. Now, for the uninitiated, the uninformed, that's something good, eh? Raise which interest rate they're talking about. When you all who complaining, well, when I put my money in the bank, all I get in is 0.5%. The bank get paid no interest, but every month they charge on my service fees. The service, they give me 5 cents in interest and taking $15 in service charge. That ain't making sense. But the UNC said they're going to request the central bank to raise interest rates. Yes, man, that's what we're talking about. Because we hear what we talk about the bank and how much money the bank taking in charge. Listen to this. We acknowledge the monetary considerations. Yes, no. Ah, boy. Right. We acknowledge monetary policy considerations by the central bank are always finely balanced amongst lowering. Right. We acknowledge monetary policy considerations by the central bank are always finely balanced amongst lowering inflation, safeguarding the balance of payments, and supporting economic growth. The Ministry of Finance will request the central bank to have monetary policy cooperate with fiscal policy as far as possible by raising the repo rate. This will send a signal for the transmission of higher and rising interest rates to the financial system, including an increase in saving and deposit rates. Higher domestic interest rates will help to limit capital outflows and improve foreign exchange availability. It will also help depositors and pension funds struggling with real negative returns in the low interest rate environment of the past decade. The UNC recognizes the need for closer coordination between fiscal and monetary policy to achieve and maintain macroeconomic stability. A mouthful, and I'm going to tell you here, repeat it, but it's there, plain. Request the central bank to raise interest rates. The interest rates that they're referring to here is not just deposit rates, right? In any event, the central bank cannot instruct the commercial banks to increase their interest rates. Because in order for the commercial banks to increase their interest rates, they need to be able to earn the money to pay those increased interest rates. And how do they do that? In the words of Peter Minshall, ask a silly question. Well, of course, through loans. The majority of the income that the banks earn is through loans and through service charges, but primarily through loans, right? The spread between what they charge you in interest and the expense and what they take. significantly large. But the UNC is telling you, put us in office and we will, through the Ministry of Finance, we will ask the central bank to increase the interest rates. And people reading that and hearing that and figure, well, yes, I'll get more money on my fixed deposit. I'll get more money on my savings account. Really? Really? As I said before, in order for there's a reason why the banks now are not increasing interest rates. For two reasons. One, coming out of the CLICO debacle, where CLICO was paying significantly higher interest rates on their deposit instruments than the commercial banks and so on. As a result of that and the crash of CLICO, people are now wary of institutions that are offering high interest rates. What we learned from that whole CLICO experience was that if it is everybody else paying low rates and you have one or two entities paying extremely high rates, you need to be wary. You need to question, how is it that they are paying these high rates and the others can't? Because a question I used to always ask back then was, why is CLICO offering these really, really high rates to attract money to fund all of their development programs when it is they could go to the banks, borrow the money, and get the loans, commercial loans at a much lower rate than what interest start private capital. And the reason was simply that the banks were not willing to lend them the money at the time because the banks considered them a risk. And they could not get the quantum of money that they were looking for from the banks at preferential interest rates because the banks were wary. And so they decided, what, let's offer high interest rates. There's EFPA, the Executive Flexible Premium Annuities, because we know there are real greedy people in Trinidad, people who have plenty of money and glad if they're getting 10% on their money and the bank paying 2%, right? And so that was the situation that prevailed at that particular point in time. So with the collapse of CLICO now, people became a little wiser, wary of entities paying much higher interest rates than the rest of the market. So the banks today are taking advantage of that. That people figure, hey, they're not quick to run now to an entity that paying 5 and 6 and 8% when the bank's only paying 1 and 2. Coming out of the CLICO experience, now they're concerned, we need to check that. Now the banks could afford to pay you higher interest rates, mind you. They're not going to, because higher interest rates attracts savings. Right now, in the economy of Trinidad and Tobago, we have the banking system, the liquidity system we have about $7-8 billion in loose capital, idle capital just sitting down in the banks there, earning no money, really. For that to earn money, the banks need to lend it, and people aren't borrowing the quantums of money that the bank wants people to borrow. And it is only when they lend this money and they charge exorbitant interest rates will they be able to earn the income to pay you a higher interest rate. Now, with the current loans that are given, the interest rates are particularly high, and they're making plenty of money. That is why you see these banks declaring profits of $1 billion, $1.5 billion, $2 billion every year. Because the spread between what they're charging on these loans and what they're paying you on your deposits, chalk and cheese. They're taking the largest for themselves, right? So they're not going to increase interest rates to encourage people to come and save more, and then you increase the amount of money that you have sitting down idle. So it's about 8 billion now. If it is we increase interest rates and people realize, well, hey, I could take my money now and run from the unit trust and put it in the bank. Or I could take my money from the credit union and put it in the bank. Or I could take it out from the cricks tin under my bed and put it in the bank and earn a decent rate of interest. All you would be doing is increasing the stock of money in the banking system. And they don't want that, because they just sit down there and they make nothing on it. So they want to lend, all right? So they're not going to increase the interest rates to encourage you to save. They want to lower interest rates on loans to encourage you to borrow so they could make money and get rid of this $8 billion that they just have sitting down there. Understand? But when Mrs. Basadi-Sessa and the UNC is telling you they will work with the central bank to increase the interest rates. Interest rates on loans going to go up because once the repo rate goes up, that is the rate at which the central bank lends money to the commercial banks. Because the commercial banks, there's a law that requires them to deposit excess money into the central bank. And then when they need to borrow, when they have a shortage of cash, the central bank will charge them an overnight rate, the repo rate, in order for them to borrow money from the central bank, right? When the repo rate goes up, it's an expense on the bank. And how do they get back that money? They increase the interest rate on loans. So it's going to become more costly for you to borrow. Normal loan, you want to buy a car, you're looking to do some repairs on your house, but also mortgage rates. Those of you who have been saving your little kakada to build your down payment to take a mortgage. When it is that the interest rate goes up on mortgage loans, you know what I mean? You have to save more money. Plenty more. All right? But they want to increase. So you're going to find, and you might take out a mortgage and you're paying a certain rate. And you know that these financial institutions, the mortgage rates are variable. So you might have a fixed rate for about 5 years, and after that they review it. And it could go up or down depending on what the interest rates are in the economy. But if she's saying we're going to increase the interest rate, you will very well find that, okay, you might be managing now with this mortgage payment, and then you get a letter from the bank saying, well, interest rates have gone up because the government has asked the central bank to increase the repo rate. So your monthly installments on your mortgage will now go up. So you who struggling to make ends meet, and you're finally able to balance your stuff, now find that your mortgage gone up by extra $5,000 or $6,000 a month because interest rates have gone up. Because the government, in its wisdom, has asked the central bank to increase the repo rate, thinking that that would lead to an increase in the rates because the institution is now earning more money from loans, so that would encourage them to pay more in money and interest. That is the logic of the UNC. So when the businesses need to take business loans to expand their businesses and they're paying higher rates of interest, what is going to happen? They pass it on to the consumer, of course, which is going to result in an increase in the cost of living. But the smart economists in the country didn't take the time to go through this and read it and explain it to the people that this is what this means. So the UNC creates a document and they put it out there, but they know the average citizen ain't going to read that. They know the members that their supporters not going to read that. Not at all. But it's there. So that when it happens, you cannot come now and say, well, all you didn't say, all you was going and do that. Oh yes, it is on page 56 of our manifesto. It's right there. Had you read the manifesto, you would have seen it. Perhaps you might not have understood, but it is right there. So don't accuse us of misrepresentation. Look at here. We posted it. You didn't read it. That's your fault. Don't blame us. That's what they say. So this is what they're offering you in 2025. Good governance, to increase your cost of living, to reduce your standard of living, to have you pay more money. And it don't even have to be you individually in terms of you ain't borrowing no money, you know. But because they tell the central bank to increase the repo rate in an attempt to entice the public who are looking for higher interest rates on their deposits, not understanding that the extra money you're making in your deposits is offset by the higher rates, the increased cost of living that you have nothing to do with. You ain't borrowing no money, but those who are borrowing money and who's selling the goods and services, they are now charging you more because the government tells the central bank to increase the rates at which they borrow. Right? And you have to suffer. So you have your kakada in the bank, you're making extra interest. Not much, maybe by extra 1%, 0.5% or whatever. But it is negligible because you have to pay now more for the basic food items in the grocery. Basic services, the prices have gone up because these businesses are now trying to squeeze you, the consumer, to get extra money to pay the increase in the interest rates that they're paying on their loans. And this, the UNC tells you, is good governance, good economic policy. This is what they offered you in 2020, and it is what they are offering you in 2025. But people ain't reading that. No, they're only studying Rowley, wicked and evil. Rowley ain't care about poor people, and the PNM ain't care about poor people. That's what they're studying, but they're not studying what the UNC is offering you. I go on. This thing doing my study, right? As I said, I have plenty more. I can't cover everything today. Well, forgive me. But I'll cover, well, just a little more. The Minister of Finance, right, will request the central bank to have monetary right. So I read that. So that's two things I pointed out to you. So when you see the token come 2025 and they're on the platform and they're talking about the monetary policy and they bring Tahaka Obika and the Tanku, who's supposed to be an economist, but doesn't know his ASS from his elbow when it comes to economics. And they come in to talk to you on the platform about economic policy and what the UNC plans to offer you higher interest rates on your deposits. Understand that there's a flip side that they're not going to talk to you about. Understand that, They're not going to tell you that side of it. The good things that don't get higher interest rates on your money in the bank and in the credit union and elsewhere. And you run with that because you're fed up only getting 0.5% and the bank eating up your interest and charges. Understand, it's going to cost you at the pump. It's going to cost you at the cash register. Understand that, right? It's going to cost you in your mortgage. And the loans that you're taking to buy a car and to fix your house and all the other things, it's going to cost you there. All right?
I continue. Let me see if I can deal with one more before we enter it. Let me see this one here. Right. One of the things that they criticize this administration for, right, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. Every time this administration goes into the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, the UNC has an issue with it. And they cry, oh, this government only raiding the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. When we were in office and the government which I led, we never made any withdrawals from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. And I've made the point before and I will repeat it. The only reason why the UNC did not raid the HSF fund was because the law prevented them from doing so. The price of oil at that time and the revenues, the highest energy revenues in the country's history, as Kamala loves to boast about, that happened under her, prevented them on the law at that time from going to the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. The HSF Act is pellucidly clear, or was back. It had to be amended in order to allow the government to make withdrawals outside of the normal schedule to fund the expenses of COVID. But at that time, the Heritage and Stabilization Fund Act was pellucidly clear, the circumstances which had to exist in order for the government to withdraw money. And it says that wherein in any quarter, if the projected revenues, or the realized revenues, fell short of what was projected by 10% or more, and those circumstances, right, then the government would have been able to make a withdrawal, right? So if it expected to get $10 billion in energy revenues in that quarter, the law said that in order for you to make a withdrawal from the HSF fund, you had to realize at least a 10% shortfall. So in other words, 10% of 10 billion is 1 billion. So it means that you had to, in any quarter, receive, if you projected to get 10 billion, you had to get 9 billion or less in actual revenues in order to be able to make a withdrawal from the Heritage and Civilization Fund. And even the withdrawal amount was limited to 60% of the shortfall. So if it is the shortfall was $1 billion, they only allowed to take 600 million. You can't take the whole billion or more. So the law was designed under Patrick Manning. It was fine to protect the Heritage and Civilization Fund from the whims and fancies of the United National Congress. That is the only reason why they didn't go into the HSF fund. Not because they didn't want to. They couldn't. The law protected them. Unfortunately, the law had to be amended in 2020 to enable the government to be able to make withdrawals outside of the normal schedule, to be able to provide the income grants and the salary relief grants and so on to persons who would have lost their jobs or who would have suffered a reduction in their income, and to pay for the other COVID expenses, right? So that if they come back in 2025 now, the law as it is would allow them to be able to go into the HSF fund and take out money, unlike the protection that existed between 2010 and 2015. The intention, here it is. This is page 46 of the UNC manifesto. And if you want to get it and read it for yourself, all you have to do, go on Google and type in UNC National Economic Transformation Plan 2020, and it will come up. It's there for your reading. Here what they say. UNC government will honor the debt to local contractors and suppliers of goods and services to the government and VAT refunds with realistic timeframes by presenting a debt management plan. 1, here it is. We will commit interest payments from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund for 2 years in the first instance to debt repayment while the economy gets time to grow. You hear that? We will commit the interest payments from the HSF for 2 years for the first instance. So they're telling you, we intend to, in order to deal with debt, in order to deal with outstanding payments to contractors like Namalco, who say we owe them 1.4 billion, right? And Calco, who say we owe them 84 million and settle for 1.4 billion, right? And Calco, who say we owe them 84 million and settle for 11, and Namalco, who say we owe them 1.2 and settle for 400 million. Put us in office. This is what they were telling you in 2020, right? Notwithstanding, it's subsequent to 2020, that case Namalco settled. But if they had come into office in 2020, they are telling you they would have used money from the Heritage and Stabilization Fund to pay Namalco their 1.2 billion. No question, we weren't going to court because these debts incurred mainly us between 2010 and 2015. The people need the money. They're suing the PNM government because the PNM saying we need to question some of these expenses and some of these invoices that all is sent. We ain't just going to pay all of this money just to prove that that this money is legit. Had they won in 2020, they were just going to come in, Heritage and Stabilization Fund, amend the law. Hey, what? Marco said 1.2 billion here. Take that from the interest that the fund earns, give it to them, pay them. How much Calco said they owe? 84. Get them that. We're not going to court to question the legitimacy of any of these invoices. Just pay it. That's what they're telling you here. 2 years. For the first 2 years, that is what they were going to do. This government has taken out money from the interest portion, which is why the Heritage and Civilization Fund balance is more or less the same that it was when they left office in 2015. So the money that the government has been taking from the HSF fund has not been from the principal sum that they met in 2015, but from the interest that would have been earned on the fund as a result of the prudent management by the current board of the fund. Unlike what happened when the UNC were in office between 2010 and 2015, that they started to introduce a law that would indemnify the board and the management of the fund. So that if they took your Heritage and Stabilization Fund money and invested it in all manner of wild things, and they lost money, that a PNM government coming in after could not sue the board or the trustees of the fund. That is what they sought to do, to protect. So you all have legal protection, indemnity. So you know what? Well, you could invest it in whatever all they want. And if you lose money, the hell with that. The PNM can't do well in nothing if all they come into office. That's what they sought to do. And they're telling you now, if you put them in office, first 2 years of office, 2020 to 2021, 2021 to 2022, they were going to take the interest portion. So they say, the HSF fund. To do what? Pay contractors, local contractors and suppliers of goods and services to the government, to pay VAT refunds within a realistic time frame. We're not questioning any invoices from contractors, we just pay. Unlike what this administration has done. Scrutinized all and took them to court, resulting in one case where the contractor settled for 1/3 of what he was asking for. 1/3. The court said, we deem, based on the information and evidence before us, at least 2/3 of what you're claiming you're owed, you can't support that with any sort of evidence. So the court rules that this is bobble. That's what the court said. We are not convinced. We are convinced that 2/3 of this bill is bobble, racket. You could get 1/3 that you could substantiate. But under UNC government, all would have been paid. All 1.2 billion would have been paid. From where? The Heritage and Civilization Fund. We will address the issue of consolidating indebtedness into longer-term debt and determine how it will be publicly presented to reflect the true debt position, while at the same time considering the extent to which this will affect the international credit ratings. So while they're beating up on this government and accusing this government of always borrowing, and increasing the country's debt to GP ratio, and increasing the country's debt profile, and incurring debt that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will have to repay, here they are telling you in black and white on page 46 of the manifesto, we will address the issue of consolidating indebtedness into longer-term debt and determine how it will be publicly presented to reflect the true debt position, while at the same time considering the extent to which that will affect international credit rating. So we're going to, the debts that we have now, we're going to refinance it for longer periods of time. And of course, the longer the loan runs is the more interest you will have to pay. So significant sums of the government's revenue that should be going to benefit the citizens of this country by paving road and building hospital like they love to build and build school and all them kind of thing would be committed now to paying interest on longer term debt rather than trying to create a policy that would generate revenue to be able to pay off these loans as quickly as possible. We're going to refinance, and if this loan have 5 more years to go, we will refinance for 15 years. So we'll be paying an additional 10 years of interest. Money that should be going to benefit the citizens, we will take that money and pay it in interest. That's what they're telling you, right? And the consideration here is we will have to consider the extent to which the international credit ratings. Well, if you have a whole set of long-term loans on your books, obviously it's going to affect your international credit rating. So that when you go to borrow more money, and it's just like when you go to the bank to take a loan and they do a credit report through TransUnion and they look to see what loans you have here and what is the tenure of these loans. All right, there's a loan here running on 3 years and another one running for another 5 years. Okay. So it means that the money is tied up for at least another 5 years or so. You need to charge them a higher rate of interest because this person is a risk. If this person were to lose their job because of a sickness or whatever it is, all of these loans could be defaulted. So we need to charge them a higher rate of interest because they're considered subprime, right? So their policy was to come in, renegotiate, refinance these loans for longer terms, commit Trinidad and Tobago, government of Trinidad and Tobago to long-term loans. So even if they serve for another 1 term, it means that whichever government came in after that now would have loans on their books for at least another 10 years. And they now have to find the money. Just like what happened now, we still paying the loan for the Cuba. Came in after that now would have loans on their books for at least another 10 years. And they now have to find the money. Just like what happened now, we still paying the loan for the Cuba hospital, right? The loan, the $1 billion loan that they took from the Chinese, we still paying that loan and interest on that loan. So a chunk of the money that the government budgets. So when you see the government say 50 billion is the expenditure, a chunk of that goes towards paying interest payments for loans that the UNC took. We're still paying the loan for the aquatic center. We're still paying the loan for the National Cycling Center, the velodrome that they built in Cuba. Still paying loans for all of those things. And all the other capital projects that they borrowed money to fund, we still pay the loan for that. This administration. Right now, they're probably still in the interest phase. They ain't started paying on principal yet. Understand that? Because some of these loans, they negotiated it so payments would have started in 2018. Right? 2018. So we now start to pay some of these loans that they took out in 2013, 14, and 15. Understand that? So when they want to talk about the country's debt profile, ask them what percentage of that debt profile was incurred by them. Put us back in office and we will renegotiate these loans for longer terms, having to pay more of your taxpayer dollars in interest over a period of years for much longer than we should have to pay. And then we'll come and tell you, we have money for this and we have money for that. You understand why this administration has to struggle financial-wise? Plenty money going to pay interest on loans that they took. And they were coming in. This is what they're promising you in 2025. Right. And we will study the impact it will have on our international credit rating after. We're not doing the research now to determine what would be the impact, You know what? We'll wait until after the fact. So just like when they built the Piaco airport, right? The person that I spoke to, I told you all one of the witnesses, who was an integral part of that project at the time based on the position that they held in one of the entities that was leading the construction, said to me, when they went to open that airport, it was just a shell, All they had was the building itself, but the inner part, nothing was in place. In fact, just a couple of weeks or so before they were supposed to open the airport on the 25th of May, which is Pandey's birthday, and there was a rumor at the time that they were rushing to open the airport on the 25th of May to coincide with Pandey's birthday. It was supposed to be a birthday gift for him, right? That when Jolene John went to do a walk through the airport to realize the food court, they didn't engage any concessionaires. So it was going to be an empty food court. They had nobody lined up to open a restaurant in the food court. So that's how come Jolene John ended up running to Mario Sabgabu, the owner of Rituals and Pizza Boys and Burger Boys, to beg him, hey, come on, open my branch in the airport. So that's how come Jolene John ended up running to Mario Sabgabu, the owner of Rituals and Pizza Boys and Burger Boys, to beg him, hey, come on, open my branch in the airport now. He was her saving grace, because you all know she was managing director of the Pizza Boys group after that. He was her saving grace. He came in, walked the perimeter, see what is the lay of the land, and he said, I got to take here. And he invested his money and opened Pizza Burger Boys there, eventually turned to Rituals and so on. But the same thing, at that time, Royal Castle was brand quite young. How you feel Royal Castle ended up in the food court? Because they were desperate. So you build an airport, you build a food court, but instead now we had to try and put out RFPs for concessionaires. Who are the restaurants we going and get here? Boy, we didn't study that, Oh gosh. Last minute thing now, are they looking to run to beg this one and that one? No kind of tendering or nothing, right? So a man come in and say, oh, yeah, I go take that spot there. All right, we desperate. So you fix up. You do what you want to do. In the back, this is why now, on any given day, if you taking a flight and you're walking through the airport, you're likely to see persons from KFC or Church's Chicken or Royal Castle pushing these big bins with chicken guts and all kind of thing in it. You know why? Because they didn't study that we need to create the facilities such that these things could be done behind the scenes. They didn't build that into the airport. So now when they have to go and discard it, they're pushing it through the same place where the travelers coming through. And you have to be smelling this thing when they're pushing this bin through there. International travelers, people who don't live in Trinidad. And you see why they have to say Trinidad and Tobago is not a real place? They didn't study all of them things either. In the back, when you go to the counter and you check in and then you give them your luggage for them to put on the plane and it goes under conveyor belt behind the representatives and so on, right? They take your suitcase and they drop it there and they go wrong in the back then. They didn't study that either. Right? All them things. This is what I was told. They didn't study all of these things either. Which is why Jolene John had to cry when she went and she saw all of these things. Like, what the hell is this? Is that airport? So all they didn't realize you need all of these things. Gone in the back there. Nothing. And today, up to today, still so, eh? Can't fix. It can't fix. So they had to bring up the cart now, right there, and they took everything and throw it in the back there. All these scanners and things and all them. Yeah, they didn't study that. So it's the same thing. Same bloody thing that they wanted. This is what they're offering you in 2025. As I said, UNC, National Economic Transformation Plan. Google it. See it for yourself. Always, if you figure that I'm making this up, no, it's right there. And I'll quote the pages for you all too. And I just dealt with 2 pages today. We will deal with the rest on another day. Tuesday, well, even though Tuesday is committed to responding to the Monday Night Forum, but if there's nothing of substance said, well, there's never anything of substance said on the Monday Night Forum. But if they talk nonsense, well, they're not going to have Monday Night Forum tomorrow, I think. So Tuesday, we'll continue this. We will deal with some of the other policies that they're offering you as good governance for 2025 to 2030. So who vexed with PNM and I voted? Understand that not voting for the PNM and voting for the UNC is the same outcome, right? Especially in constituencies that are considered marginal, where victory could be determined by a couple hundred votes. And understand you have a lot of people there now who, imagine yesterday I go into the barber. I get damn vexed. I sit down in the barber chair. And one of the barbers, the man who owned the barber shop. So you have about 3 customers sit down there and the conversation becomes political, right? So they were talking about, the conversation started about who have the best roti and all of this different kind of stuff, right? And then somebody mentioned about where you could get the best burgers and stuff. And they mentioned Baraka Grounds, which in Ishmael. And the person was saying, and then the topic came up, but who gave Inshan that land? And a man jump up and says, PNM do that. Yeah, the PNM give Inshan that land. Watch me grinding like a sugar mill. I want to say something. Then the barber jump up at the ball. He said, so he said, Baba, you sure is the PNM give Inshan? Yes, it's the PNM give that. All right. Very Baba. And who give away the lands in Shagaramas? The PNM. The PNM do that? Yes, the PNM. Rowley and them get them fellas, they pay 1%. Watch me. I'm vexed and my barber seeing it on my face. I see them, and I want to say something. I tell my barber, I say, there's a level of illiteracy all they have inside this barber shop. These men forget when it is that Keith Rowley, Ansel Roger, David Abdullah, David Mohammed, Jack Warner, Cook, we and all of these people march, and thousands of citizens march from Shagaramas to the waterfront to protest the giving away of the lands in Shagaramas, and them coming to talk nonsense about the PNM gave lands to the people. You know what? Because they have it in their psyche that the PNM and the 1%. So, right? So it's the PNM give away them lands. Let me tell you, if I was a red man, they would have seen it yesterday. I walk out of the barbershop and the only thing I do is cuss. And this is the level of illiteracy that exists in this country, and you have people walking around with the right to vote, talking that nonsense. I wouldn't go and do their research. The memory short. But this is what we have to contend with in 2025. But meanwhile, the man who's responsible for producing content for the PNM Social Media Committee, one Dane G. Wilson, go on his Facebook page and see what he had time to post. Dane G. Wilson, go on his Facebook page, pull it up and see, you have time to generate content like this. No, you have time to post nonsense about all kind of stupid thing and look, I don't even want to talk about it. Waste that time. Waste that time. But he is the man given the responsibility by the social media officer to generate content. He's in charge of the content committee. Dane G. Wilson. Go on his Facebook page. Don't assault him. Just go on his page and see what it is he's putting out. And tell me if that making any sense. He ain't had time to create content to educate you, the public, but he have time to post that trash and then want to come on this page to criticize us who are actually doing something of sense. But people, sorry. Let's see what. Right. It is, what is the time? All right. I think I talk enough. This is my longest live that I have done. And I'm still in touch with surface here. All right. So Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We will chat again on Thursday, all right, where we will interrogate more of the UNC's economic transformation plan. What they are telling you is good governance. We will address that in a fulsome way until we complete it so that you could have the information you need. So when they come with the nonsense on social media, you can let them know. Quote the pages for them. All right? So all the folks on here, Eric, Patsy Nelson, Anon, Val, Alte Allen, thank you guys so much. Winston Bachilo, I'm seeing all of these people here. Carol Myers, Donna Seeley, Shireen Jack, Patricia Lazare, good morning. Damian Takini. Takini. Damian says, I wonder if the people who didn't vote for Dominic to admit their mistake because the fella they vote for and doing that. That is so true. Clear Irish. Phyllis Antoine, thank you all so much for joining me this afternoon for another hour. As I said, hopefully soon enough we will have the call-in facility in place, and then we could spice up eating a little bit, right? So enjoy the rest of your day. I don't know what G is for, and Wilson. You could just visit his page. Don't customer, but then they go say I send all it to molest him. So please, just you could just visit his page and see what he puts on. This man is the person who's been charged with the responsibility to provide the social media content and the UNC manifesto. And he had time for that. Go and see what it is he had time for. Folks, thank you. And he had time for that. Go and see what it is he had time for. Folks, thank you so much. We will chat again on Tuesday, please God. Enjoy your holiday tomorrow. The rest of your week, have a productive one, and I will try to do the same. Tuesday morning, 6:30. Unfortunately, Tuesday is not a holiday. Which one you prefer, Tuesday 6:30 a.m. or you prefer it in the evening? Which one you prefer? I know it might not be ideal for some people, the morning time. But you can let me know. You can let me know what we decide. But we're not playing. It's serious business here. All right, but Tuesday for sure. Carol says AM. I'm seeing some people saying PM. I'm seeing AM. Claire says AM. All right, no problem. 6:30 AM on Thursday morning. Yeah, folks? All right, so that's it for me there for today. Share the live. I'm out.